so lonely, broken angel. I'm so lonely.
Steven Pinker, welcome to Hard Talk.
Thank you.
This idea of the Enlightenment is very dear to your heart. Can you briefly, if you will, just capture for me what you mean by the Enlightenment?
It refers to the intellectual movement in the second half of the 18th century that put a premium on reason as opposed to authority, tradition, dogma, charisma, on science, on the attempt to explain the world by testing hypotheses, and on humanism, on the well-being of individual humans as the ultimate good, as opposed to the glory of the nation or the tribe or perpetuation of the faith.
And a movement born out of European thought, but is it your proposition that it captures universal values?
European, also American, but I guess that's an offshoot of Europe. But yes, although every idea has to come from somewhere, so it's European in that sense, but that it's based on reason, of which humans are universally capable, and it's based on universal human interests. Everyone wants to a long life. Everyone wants to be healthy. Almost everyone wants knowledge and education. People would prefer to live in safety rather than in danger, all things being equal. So it's
science and reason have, I think it's fair to say, underpinned so much of sort of human thought and human scientific and technological development in recent centuries. But is it your feeling that this Enlightenment is under threat?
It absolutely is. In fact, it has been since it was formulated. The counter-enlightenment of the 19th century arose very quickly after the Enlightenment. The Romantic movement, the glorification of blood and soil, romantic militarism, the idea that the individual is merely a cell in a superorganism consisting of their nation or their race or their ethnic group. And we are seeing a resurgence of counter-enlightenment thinking in authoritarian populism, in Trumpism in the United States, in the populist movements in Eastern Europe.
And by saying that, you're sort of suggesting that Trumpism in the United States is as far as you're concerned, an utterly illogical, counterproductive political movement.
So I would argue that it is counterproductive indeed. And although talking about the intellectual roots of Trumpism sounds like a bit of an oxymoron, but in fact it does have a pedigree. He was advised by people like Steve Bannon and Steve Miller and Michael Anton, who consider themselves intellectuals, who were influenced by a counter-enlightenment tradition. And you can see some of the themes of Trumpism, such as that there's an inherent virtue in a particular people, and that whose soul is embodied in a strong leader who needn't be encumbered by the millstone of an administrative state, but just voices their goodness directly. These are themes that run through counter.
Well, it would seem to me that Donald Trump's politics is a politics driven by emotion, driven by an appeal to a person's gut instincts rather than necessarily their rational brain. And he connects. I mean, the skill of Donald Trump is that, unlike many of his political rivals, he found and continues to find a way to connect with a very significant part of the American population.
Indeed. And certainly emotional impulses such as tribalism, such as authoritarianism, that is, vesting power in a charismatic leader. Reasoning by anecdote rather than by facts and data. That is the compelling story about the American who was mowed down by an illegal immigrant breaking a traffic law. It is an appeal to our not so rational side.
But if Trump isn't an aberration, is he? He's not a blip. I mean, he's part of a long line of politicians that, while you would say, the last few centuries have been a triumph of science and reason, many would say the last few centuries have absolutely shown us that the human species is often driven by gut instinct, by emotion, and by feelings that aren't anything to do with science or reason.
Indeed. And in fact, one of the misconceptions about Enlightenment thinkers is that they assume that we're all rational, that we're all like Mr. Spock from the original Star Trek. But the Enlightenment thinkers like Hume, like Spinoza, like Adam Smith, like the American founders, they were avid students of human nature, and they were all too aware of human flaws. And they proposed norms and institutions that were workarounds for our darker impulses. So those impulses are always with us, and at various times in history they do.
I'm so lonely, broken.